share this, save this and share this with others that aren't able to join us today. My name is Stephen Allen. I'm the Executive Director for ARPA, and I'll be acting as the moderator for the webinar. Today's webinar, we're going to focus on program modifications specifically during COVID-19. I saw in some of the comments people were asking for program modifications related to aquatics and stuff like that, and aquatics likely will be obviously shut down over this period. So we'll look to do a program modification in recovery webinar later in the year as well, once we're closer to that, to deal with broader modifications. So this one's going to deal with specifically during COVID. I'd like to first acknowledge the First Nations, the Métis, and all the people across Alberta who share a shared history and a deep connection with this land. We dedicate ourselves to moving forward in partnership with Indigenous communities in a spirit of reconciliation and collaboration. Just a little bit about ARPA. So the Alberta Recreation and Parks Association is a charitable not-for-profit organization. We're committed to building healthier and happier communities and citizens by developing and promoting recreation and parks. We have almost 2,000 members from across the province. Majority of those are municipalities, but we have NGOs, students, post-secondaries, businesses as well. We're also a member of the Canadian Parks and Recreation Association, which is a national organization dedicated to realizing the full potential of parks and recreation as a major contributor to community health and vibrancy. We have a high number on today's webinar, so we're setting a record today. Thank you for being a part of that. We have over 185 people registered. We'll see how higher numbers do get, but we've already kind of broke our record because our one on Tuesday had a cap of 100, and we had 80 some in there. That was our largest previous one. So thank you for being a part of that. We do have 3 panel members today who are going to share their personal and organizational stories and examples of how they've modified their programming for their constituents and others as a result of the COVID-19 situation. We're also going to be sharing some resources, hopefully, that you can help in planning and making future decisions. And please, if you have websites, resources that you want to share, please email them to me. My email is sallan, S-A-L-L-A-N, at arpaonline.ca. And we're going to throw a webinar page together on this that would have the recordings and any other resources that we can share to help people in their modifications. So Patrick McQuarrie with ARPA is also here. He's going to provide tech support today, but he's also going to help provide an overview of the Zoom platform and some of the features and how we're going to use them today. So Patrick, I might just turn it over to you quickly for that.
Sure. I'm just going to quickly go over what a Zoom webinar platform.
Oh yeah, there you go.
Oh, there we go. Okay. I'm just going to quickly go over what a Zoom webinar platform looks like. For those of you that are used to doing Zoom meetings where you have control of your own audio and video, in a webinar, as an attendee, you don't have the ability to turn on your audio or your video, not because we don't trust you, but because there's just so many of you that it could be a little chaotic. But there is a few features that you can still use to engage with us. It depends on what you're logged in on, whether you're logged in on a phone or a MacBook or a tablet or a laptop or whatever it is, but everyone should have the ability to open the chat panel on the side, and you can communicate with us through the chat. You also have the ability to raise your hand. If there's something that you need, you can raise your hand and we can see that you're doing that. But for the most part, if you want to engage with our presenters today, we're going to be using the Q&A pod. So if you click on the little Q&A pod at the bottom of the screen, you should be able to enter a question, and all of the panelists and me and Steve can see those questions, and we will make sure that we get to answering them. So if any of the panelists are not currently presenting and have an answer for one of the questions in there, you're welcome to enter the answer via text, or we might address it live during the webinar. But other than that, I'll just throw it back to Steve and our panelists.
Perfect. Thanks, Patrick. So today's panelists will include Tim Adams. He's the founder of Free Footie, as well as Amanda Arbuckle and Colin Harris, and they're from the Town of Banff. In terms of format, we're going to start with Tim Adams, and he'll provide some details on Free Footie and how they've changed what they do, first of all, and what they've changed in their programming and how they've responded. And then we'll have, hopefully you can do your Q&A specific to Free Footie if you have any questions on what they're doing and how they're doing it. We're then going to move to Amanda and Colin with the Town of Banff. They have a presentation they're going to run through, and we'll share that on the screen, and then focus some questions based on their presentation. Hopefully at the end, we'll be able to open the floor to other questions and do some sharing as a group. To kick things off before we get to Tim, even though we do we played with some poll stuff on Tuesday and it worked fairly decently. So we're gonna put up a couple poll questions, simple poll questions that you can answer, and we'll just get the results real quick. So the first one is, it should be on your screen if you can see it if you're on the computer. Is your organization offering modified programming since the start of COVID-19? And just to note, the panelists won't be able to vote on this, and it's basically simple, yes or no. And we'll just give it a few secs here to populate up, and then I don't know, Patrick, you can pick when you feel comfortable posting it.
Can you see the results, or is that exclusive to me? All right.
All right, so interesting. Okay, so 47% have modified their programming, but there's actually a greater number that haven't. So you're on the right call today. So you're going to hear a lot of great things that people are doing that you can modify your programming. Patrick, maybe go on to the question number 2, and it's going to be more for the people who have modified their programming. So this one is, what type of modified programming is your organization providing? And I've probably missed some here, but you can select multiple ones. So you have online programming, equipment game home drop-offs, shifting to more community support, seniors, food programs, partnering with other community sport organizations as an example to offer some sort of modified programming, or other, because I'm sure there's a whole bunch of other out there that we'll hear about. So please go ahead and fill that in, and then we'll see what the results look like. All right, thanks, Patrick. So what type of modified programming is your organization providing? So 66% are doing some online programming. Only 8% are doing some equipment or game home drop-offs. 32% are shifting to some more community types of needs, whether it's seniors, food programming, or other. 15% are looking to partner with community organizations, and 15% are doing something else. So hopefully, if we have time later, we can find out what some of those other things might be. So thank you for participating in that poll. I'm going to turn it over to Tim Adams to start introducing Free Footie and some of the stuff, the unique stuff they're doing. And I want to give kudos to Free Footie. I think they were one of the first ones out of the gate I saw in terms of modifying and offering some programming. And while Tim's talking, I'm going to share my screen and share some of the Free Footie stuff. And Tim, if at any point you want me to play one of the videos, just let me know and I'll do that.
Okay, thank you. Hi, everyone. Welcome to the new virtual life. We're all adapting and all learning, but one of the beauties of it is I get to see inside everyone's home and see your cool books, Colin, or maybe you get to see some of my neat art. I've been on a ton of video chats, I'm sure like you have too, and it's just pretty neat to have that access into people's space. And so there is some silver linings in it. But if you don't know about Free Footie, Free Footie started about 12 years ago now, and it started really as a space to just create soccer for kids with the highest needs. And it was really targeted to the highest needs schools in Edmonton. We started with just 4 schools, and it grew to 8 schools, 16 schools, 26 schools. Now we work with 64 schools. It's also adapted to a year-round program where we have 5 different sports. So Free Footie is a bit of a misnomer now because we also do basketball and street hockey and flag football and touch rugby. And we reach about 4,000 youth a year. And we pick youth based on a social vulnerability index, which ranks schools based on need in collaboration with the public school board and the Catholic school board. And then we partner with those schools to deliver after school programming, which works in a sort of simple format where we send a bus to the school, it picks up the kids in the program, bring them to the venue. We have coaches waiting there and teacher support as well. We run a session, the bus takes them back to their school, and then they go home from there. And over the last year, we've really started working on implementing a social emotional learning component to all our sessions. So every single practice plan includes a very dedicated section of it on mental and social and emotional health and how we can drip feed that into every single session. So a simple example would be another day prior to all this, we were talking about how to recognize your emotions. And one of those key ones was like how you recognize when you're frustrated and how to deal with it. And so that's very easy to do in a game concept. It was basketball at the time. If your shot gets blocked, you get frustrated right away. How do you recognize that? How do you move on from it? But how do you create that in a practice space? So what we came up with, this is just as one example, was when you're small and you try to throw the ball over your head and catch it behind your back, it's really hard because your arms are really small and you're little, and it's just a hard task. So we did that as the practice, getting kids to throw the ball over their head, catch it behind their back. Everyone gets frustrated. And then you talk to them about recognizing that you're frustrated, how to deal with it, taking 3 deep breaths and trying again. And then we implement that in the game. And then after the game happens, once the whole session is over, we say, okay, when you go home or you go to school, try to use those same lessons that you learned here with getting frustrated, taking 3 deep breaths and trying again. When you come back next week, we want you to tell us about how you use the lesson you got on the practice and on the court at home or at school. So it's trying to sync it all together. So that's sort of the nutshell of what we've been doing. We also have a junior referee program and a junior coaching program for kids in junior high and high school to learn how to be a referee and get their certifications as a referee, and learn how to be a coach and get their certifications as a coach. Obviously, this new world has changed all that. We can't move 4,000 kids into venues anymore. And so we adapted really, really quickly into what we call free Footie TV, as you can see on the screen there. I think we adapted the Monday after everything really went down on the Friday. It was Friday the 13th, I believe, when everything really went down. By the Monday, we had adapted at noon and we're offering online sessions. And the concept sort of behind that, I was really lucky as a youth to work alongside some pretty high-ranking people in the Navy, pretty high-ranking people in the military, pretty high-ranking people at what's called Atomic Energy of Canada. I grew up in near Chalk River, which is a big nuclear research laboratory, and I was running a summer festival, and this massive catastrophe happened. And one of the heads of Atomic Energy was the president of the board at the time, and he said to me, in a crisis, the best decision is a decision. And so not thinking too much about it, moving your feet and trying to make a decision quickly and then adapting afterwards and correcting any wrong mistakes that you made, but making a decision quickly. So we got our team together. We made a really quick decision to flip online, found a platform really quickly to do that. And it's something called Be Live. And so we use this software called Be Live. And that allows us to do a shared screen on Facebook Live. And it allows us to do text overlays and all kinds of neat interactions, sort of like a TV studio. And then we invite a guest every day. It started every day at 12 and 4 p.m. And we have a host, our host is Adriana, who was our former head coach and is our sponsorship manager as well. And so she hosts a session with a guest every day at 12 and 4 p.m. And you can see some of the guests there with Angela White. You can see Musa there, who is a ball skill expert. We did drumming sessions with Reki. Steve Sir, who's the NCAA's all-time leader in three-point shooting and was about to go to the Olympics for 3-on-3. So we just invited this roster of guests to come every day and join. And one of the big lessons from that was actually how do you set up those people for success, because it's all new to them. So what we did is we would have them do a 5-minute session and we'd give them the full screen, and then they'd come back in and we'd chat with them for 2 minutes, and then the 5 minutes, and then chat for 2, 5 minutes, chat for 2, because it gave them a touch point. Just like right now, I can't see any of you. I don't know who's hearing what. I don't know if what I'm saying is resonating. So we'd give them the full screen for 5 minutes, and then I or Adriana would appear in the bottom of the screen when that 5 minutes was getting close to winding up. And then they would see us and know, okay, it's time to come in and chat. And if their session was going a little off to the side and it wasn't quite where we wanted it to land, we could help correct it in a nice positive way and then send them back out for their 5 minutes and then they'd come back again. And it was really a way for people to get used to delivering something online, and it's worked pretty well. So that's sort of been our main staple. And then we are flipping over to running all our programming again in 2 weeks, where we are hosting upwards of 32 sessions at a time. And we'll have our coach with our 15 kids on that team. And they will be in a session just like this with their 15 kids, and it will focus on a physical literacy skill that's fun and engaging, and those same social emotional skills we were working on. We're going to bring them back in. Just the physical literacy skill now is going to change ever so slightly to not be a team dynamic, but to be more focused on individual skills. And I would just say that we never stopped any of our junior ref and junior coaching program. We run that every single day still at 3 p.m. And the value that I was mentioning to Steve before we got on, the value of being one of our biggest challenges was transportation before. If you're dealing with at-risk communities, and transportation is always one of the #1 barriers for folks, is how do you get everyone into a space? And we used to run this all the time, and we were taxiing kids from all ends of the city to get them to take part in our junior ref and junior coaching program. Well, now we just flipped it all online and we can see them every day. And the depth of the relationship in 3 weeks has gone way farther than we were able to create since September. It's just gone so much deeper just because we can have that daily contact. Everyone's interacting. Everyone needs a space to connect. So there's been quite a few silver lining moments. It's been hard, but there's been quite a few silver lining moments in terms of creating those real connections and showing that you can flip. I would just add that the ability to flip like this has been really dependent on having a great team. I'm sure everyone who's out there has great people on their team, but being able to get people into their skill set. Adriana, who's hosting these sessions, is amazing. You see the website with all the graphics and everything. She's just so good at creating that stuff. So we've been blessed with having good people around. But there are a lot of people out there looking for work right now who are also very good at this stuff, who could supplement you if it's not your forte. So that's just my quick overview. Hopefully, if you have questions, we can get into it, but I just don't want to steal too much space. I think Steve is maybe going to try click on a video.
Yeah,
I'm not sure.
Yeah, let's try this video and see how it works. But
So this is how the split screen would work. Adriana there is the host. Annie is actually an NCAA athlete, a goalkeeper. She grew up playing community league soccer and then got springboarded onto the NCAA and is actually looking to sign a pro contract pretty soon. So a really good story. And these are sort of how we run the sessions. The split screen, they have a little chat about how they're, about the session of the day and a bit about Annie's story to pull more out. And then it will go over to the full screen and she'll run a little session. And then again, we'll come back to both of them. They'll chat, full screen, back and forth. And we do that sort of with everybody. But this is a good spot where she's teaching diving onto a mattress. But like she said, I'm just going to sacrifice my mattress to help kids learn. And, you know, there are ways that this can be done. And I think one of the challenges that we've had is, you know, actually as of yesterday, the point was, well, why do we keep doing this when now like the NBA is putting out lessons and the NHL is putting out lessons and you see videos of Connor McDavid doing skills at home. Why do we need to keep doing this? And I think the value is because all our kids, Adriana was our head coach, all our kids know who Adriana is. And so there's a connection. There's still a real connection. Just like my own personal kids. I couldn't show them a video of Messi and have them do it off YouTube, but I can get them to watch Adriana and they'll do the session just because there's that connection there. And so I think that's another thing to consider as we're going forward. If you have coaches or youth leaders or mentors who already have a connection, that connection is still valid. It's more valid than ever. And that's the stuff that will get people engaged in the content. Because just blasting content at them, no one's going to engage with it. They engage with the human being. And it's the same. I don't know if anyone knows my former life, but I was a journalist for 15 years for CBC. And it's all about that connection with the host and the reporter and the journalists to have that trusted relationship where you want to continue learning from them or hearing the stories that they share. And I think it's exactly the same with coaching and leadership. It's the exact same thing. You already have that relationship. You are the best person to deliver the content still, even above Connor McDavid. I know people might think that, you know, he's the all-star to show the material, sure, but the person to actually deliver the interaction is you, because you're the one with the relationship. And we've seen that in a big way.
Perfect. Thanks, Tim. And I think that your first comment is an important one, and I'm glad you did it, is just jump in and fix it later. So you can always improve, you can always make it better, but the important thing is to jump in and really try to do something that's gonna help support your constituents, your citizens, your market, others. So in terms of that, I would like you to touch on the free food program. You also kind of, I would call it a pivot in this regard, because it was always a concern of yours, but now you've pivoted a little bit to do something.
Yeah, we pivoted in a big way just because so many of our kids rely on the great agencies like E4C in Edmonton that provides breakfast and lunch programs at school. And as soon as school canceled, our number one concern as a staff unit and me personally was, where are these kids going to get food from now that there's no school? And I know those great systems are out there, and now they've got some funding, which is fantastic, and they are figuring out their ways to turn over to delivering food. But there was that pause period where how do these big organizations flip over and get food to kids at their home now because they can't get it at school? So there was a big gap. So we started getting emails without even asking anybody. We were getting 95 emails a day requesting food service, requesting support. And so we just pivoted. And it's been extremely rewarding, as you can imagine, but extremely difficult at the same time, how to pivot to an industry you're not involved in. And we just pivoted quickly to make sure we could fill the gap, and hopefully like passing it back over to the people who are really good at food service. I'm not really interested in like trying to command that space in any way, but just to support it. And so we've been on a lot of interagency calls of how we now, like, as the big organizations get a bit more formed up and they're flipping over their massive teams to be able to do more home delivery stuff, how we can simply be an arm of what they're doing and a supporting group of what they're doing. But lots of challenges with food delivery at the beginning when I was trying to get 150 families worth of food. It was really hard. All the grocery stores were completely tapped out. No one was having a conversation with a new player in the space at the beginning. The food bank would offer us 5 hampers, and we have 150 people that we need to get to, 5 hampers a day, because we didn't have that direct relationship. And when we were referring our folks to other services, they were all saying that they were tapped out. So what ended up happening is that I actually went to the grocery store. So I wouldn't go shopping for 150 people and work with the managers at each store to fill up the roster. We got a dietitian to send us a list of the best week's worth of food for a family of 5. And then I went grocery shopping at the stores and worked with the managers at a few different stores to just fill up the supply. And then Ruki, who is our program manager, she's flipped over entirely to food service. She assembles all the baskets, all the hampers. We put a ball in it and some instructions. And then another person on our team who's our administrator, her name is Paula. She's entirely flipped to route design. So we take all the addresses of our family and put them into a Google map, and it populates out routes. So we make routes of 5 people that are really close together. So it's optimized. And then those hampers that Rookie's made, they get picked up by coaches actually from our team who we're paying to help do some deliveries, and a few volunteers pick up the hampers, and they're given a route by Paula, and they go to that route, and they usually take under an hour. So we've sort of figured out a way to optimize that food delivery space. And now it's turning over to, okay, how do we work? The big systems are really kicking into gear. The food bank, obviously they've always been in gear, but really, they're ramping up. They're getting more money from the governments to stock up. So we're just flipping to how can we maybe work more closely with the food bank for them to be the supplier of food, because that's what they're great at, and they can get great margins. And we will sort of simply be the delivery agent. But a few calls lately on interagency calls has been like, how does that delivery look a bit more inclusive? How does that delivery include a piece of equipment? How does that delivery include information on EI? How does that delivery potentially include devices, laptops, iPads, whatever the case may be? And how does that delivery at a safe social distance potentially include a little bit of education for someone who's receiving a device to be able to use it appropriately, because that's one of the other major challenges. The next emerging challenge in all the interagency calls I've been on is the digital literacy piece. It's just not there for most people. Like, if you've never had access to this kind of platform before, to try and figure it out when English isn't your first language is just not a fair fight. And so it's turned to, a lot of the conversation has turned to, how can these deliveries, if they're of food or pickups, how can they be much more inclusive? And I think that's where this community space really comes in, is what can be in that basket that gets sent out, and who can be the person to help facilitate so that there's still that connection to all the different resources that exist. And I think that's sort of where everything is going in the next 2 to 3 weeks, of doing more inclusive deliveries.
All right, thanks for that, Tim. I just wanted to note that Tim did win through the ARPA, at the ARPA conference, one of the Lieutenant Governor Awards for active communities. And I think you can just see by some of the work that he's doing here and the pivot that definitely well recognized and well deserved there, Tim. So there is no open questions in the Q&A portal. So just as a reminder, at the bottom of your screen, there is a Q&A. It says Q&A. You can enter any questions you may have for Tim, Free Footie, in there, and we will try and answer them as we go. And then I've seen that it's 12:30 now. We may just shift over to Amanda and Colin, and then Tim, we may come back. There's specific questions for you, and then we'll try to do some general questions at the end as well. So Amanda and Colin, I'm going to turn it over to you, and hopefully you're able to share your screen and continue. So there's one question here before you go. Rob's asking, are you working directly with municipalities, Tim?
Yeah, well, I'm on calls with the city of Edmonton pretty regularly in different spaces, whether that be in the sort of sport and recreation space, or the food service space, or the social service space. And we have just created a really good connection, I think, where any families that we can't get to right away with food, the city has actually set up an email space just for us, and other agencies are going to pile in there, that's checked by a team of social workers. So if we can't get you food or the service that you need right away, we automatically connect them to that email address. And then the team of social workers that works for the city, I think they said there's 12 of them, will be able to individually help everybody on the list and connect them to other services that might not be ours. So we sort of turn more into, we have a network of people that we're connected to. It's 4,000 kids a year, which turns into a massive network of people. We're a great way to get information to people. And so that's how sort of our real connection with municipalities has turned. And I think that's another big one to think about, is there's a lot of little agencies out there like Free Footie that people don't really know about, but are connected to so many people. And when people are looking for help, they turn to the people they know best. And often, a lot of time, it's their coach or their drama instructor or their music teacher. And so if you can rely on those assets that are out there in the community who have those networks to connect to those bigger municipality infrastructures that are out there, this team of 12 social workers is amazing. So now we're managed to connect all this group of people to those 12 social workers, which I think is fantastic. But constantly involved in conversations with the city, and I've actually been really impressed with the social service work that's going on, and the collaboration that's trying to go on right now. I've never seen more collaboration in my life, working in this space and serving in this space. Everyone's really coming together. So, and the city's been doing a good job of trying to spearhead it. Yeah,
it's funny when we're forced into collaboration, it happens.
Yeah,
happens well, totally. Right?
And collaboration, like, honestly, often I've ran into this a lot, and I'll say it, but it's probably crass, is collaboration is often way harder than just doing it on your own. But the end result of collaboration is way better than doing it on your own.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, great. All right, Amanda and Colin, I'm going to turn it over to you guys.
Patrick, I'm going to try sharing my screen. Let me know if it works okay there. 1 second. Did it go or no?
Not yet. But there should be a share button at the top. Sometimes you have to hit 2 or, yeah. Okay, now I think we're good. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. So hello everyone, I'm Amanda Arbuckle and I'm the Manager of Recreation with the Town of Banff, and also joining us today is Colin Harris, Recreation Initiatives Coordinator with the Town of Banff as well. So we're going to speak to what we're experiencing here in Banff and what we as a Recreation Division have done in the past, which is crazy to think, 3 to 4 weeks. Only. So we'll just give you an overview quickly of kind of what's happened and how we've responded. So here's a beautiful picture of Banff Ave, and it looks a little different than most of you probably are used to seeing it, you know, with 20,000 people on the sidewalks. Right now, this is what a typical day looks like in downtown Banff. So a big adjustment here, even for us residents, just in terms of how quiet it is in our community. We definitely feel like a small town again. So today we're just going to speak about our rec division and kind of how we operate and how we function, a little bit about the town of Banff. I think there's a lot of misconceptions out there sometimes about our demographical makeup, so just want to make sure you guys are aware of that, and just that we are typically quite similar to a large urban center. How our community services department responded and is responding to COVID-19, and our programming adaptations, and then those accompanying challenges and opportunities with those programming adaptations. So a little bit about our team. So recreation is a part of community services in the town of Banff, and we're a little more unique in the sense that, so it includes FCSS, community development, settlement services. So we hold the contract to that for the Bow Valley Immigration Partnership, and Immigration and Refugee Services. So community services actually holds those contracts. So we're lucky in the sense that we get to collaborate with those folks regularly. That's also resulted in us being quite engaged and involved with emergency social services responses during the COVID pandemic. And just so you guys are aware, how we've kind of broken it up from the recreational perspective is Colin's taken the lead for most of the recreational services delivery. And I've been working on leading with a smaller team, starting to think about recovery strategies, and then working on the communication piece with emergency social services, which is all run through this team on the screen here. So I myself wasn't here in the 2013 flood. However, much of those folks on that previous slide were. So that's actually the Banff Recreation Grounds in that image there. And as you can see, it was completely underwater, and you know, we were quite impacted as a community. But there's benefits to this. Our team knew how to stand up our emergency coordination center and our emergency social services quickly. We have really good systems in place, and we know how to connect with our community through our emergency response programs. I think the biggest thing is that you know, our recreation team is a part of emergency social services, so we're included in that formula of how we stand up and we fill roles. So if that isn't something that's happening in your community, I highly recommend you do that, because you know, as recreation experts, we have a lot of empathy. We're constantly connecting with community directly. As Tim highlighted, we collaborate with so many nonprofits on a regular basis, so we have those connections. So I think there's a lot of benefit for us to be involved in those pieces. So as I mentioned, Banff, we're a community of 8,000 people. 33% of us were foreign born. So we have a lot of Filipino and Japanese population here. So Tim, again, speaking about the language barriers, you know, we're definitely seeing that with EI applications and the CURB applications happening right now. And community services has definitely had to step up and provide supports to those folks. And we're quite young. So our median age is 34. So that's quite different than a lot of other communities. And you know, I think a lot of people think we come from a high socioeconomic background, but 60% of our population earns less than 40,000. So in a crisis like COVID, we definitely see a lot of needed community. And then add to that, I think the stat will be a little different this year, but we typically have 3 million tourists a year. So it's just a different feeling in town. And I think even it not being as busy or just having those constant touch points with people is a big adjustment for a lot of us. The only other piece I wanted to highlight here is one of the unique things about Banff is we have a really comprehensive access program. So to kind of deal with those pieces I just mentioned, we provide a lot of free recreation, transit, food services to our low-income community. And in fact, our council was just about to move ahead with free recreation drop-in programs for all residents this fall. It sounds like they're still planning to go ahead with that, but we might have to push back to January pending our capacity to market and promote and where COVID's at. And you can definitely see why that's important for us. So we're experiencing an 85% unemployment rate in Banff right now. So the major impacts we're seeing as a result of COVID are housing, so people's inability to pay rents, employment, because we have a lot of folks here who their employment is actually tied to their visas. And then we had a lot of folks who needed to leave the country quickly. So we also had a lot of Australians and families from the UK that were here, and we needed to get them out of community. So they had to get out of their accommodations, finish up with their employers, and get home as quickly as they could. So we had 2 weeks of a lot of scrambling to get people where they needed to be. And so our team was full bore, stepping in on ESS and supporting that. And then, you know, exactly what Tim was speaking to as well, you know, the other piece is the language barriers, the lack of computers for people to fill out those applications coming up, and then lots of concerns about our vulnerable populations, about their isolation and potential mental health needs. So specifically to recreation, the impacts to us have obviously been the cancellation of childcare programs, the closure of our recreation center, the closure of the dog park and playgrounds. We're also closing our skate park and basketball courts today. We're leaving the open park spaces, our park spaces open for right now. We've also had a lot of impacts to our leaseholders in our rec centers, so our concessionaires, our commercial operators releasing from us. And then instructor and employee layoffs. But for each of those, because we have such a great team, we were able to address a lot of those negatives with a lot of positives. So with the childcare program cancellations, we set up through our ESS system an online help at banff.ca tool where people could let us know if they needed childcare, and we could connect them with babysitters and community. We're also making sure that parents know of their rights with their employer with respect to childcare with the school closures. And then with the rec centers closing, we've been working with Alberta Health Services to make sure that they're aware of that space and they can use it however they need. And with our leaseholders, we've provided rent abatement for the period of the closure. And we're also help setting our concessionaire up with food delivery. So we've amended their lease to allow them to do food delivery in community. And then I think the 2 biggest ones for us are obviously the revenue impacts. We have a lot of folks who come to Banff to get married in the summer in our facilities. So that's been a big piece and a big pill for council to swallow and administration to swallow as to how we move through that after that major loss of revenue. So yeah, and then the only other thing I would note, especially from the recreation perspective, that I think is important through this and from the programming piece, is that I think it's important to make sure we're checking in with those contract instructors and we're asking them, you know, are they aware that they qualify for CERB and are they aware of how to apply for EI? A lot of those instructors we use for aquafit, for group fitness, and for all those pieces, they're typically self-employed. So I think we have a responsibility working for municipal government to make sure we refer them to what they need to. So just a little bit more on how we're set up in community services. So we are ESS for the town, so emergency social services. So within recreation, Colin's going to speak to exactly what we've done in terms of setting up our own dedicated website and the programming that we're currently doing. And then we also have essential services. So we're providing supports for food security, financial resources, and housing. With seniors, just making sure we know they're a vulnerable population they're taking care of. And FCSS is working on volunteer coordination, mental health, and supporting our immigrant population. I would note in the first 2 weeks, the recreation division, actually all of our staff sat under essential services for the most part. We supported our Banff.ca COVID help site, which essentially was for residents, making sure they had all the referral information for the government programs, and making sure parents had the resources they needed with respect to school closures and the transfer to online school programming. And then we have those front desk staff that are used to dealing with people every single day, have those personal connections. So they moved on to the front line of our phones, so answering help@banff.ca and our general phone lines, and making sure we were providing people with the necessary connections and referral to the resources they needed, whether it be EI support, our food rescue program or whatnot, making sure they're aware of their rights as a tenant and those pieces. So we were doing a lot of research in the back end of about all the programs that were coming out day by day from the federal and provincial government, and just making sure we could communicate those to some of our more vulnerable populations. So yeah, so this is what our dedicated website, just a screenshot of it. Again, it's banff.ca/COVID help if you want to check it out. So we have financial resources, housing, all those bits, as well as a link to recreation and all of the resources that Colin's going to speak to there. So that's the high level, what we've kind of done as a recreation division and as a part of community services. I think, again, it's been a wonderful benefit for us to be so connected to settlement services and FCSS through this process to provide the necessary supports. And I'll switch it over to Colin, who's going to now speak specific to the things that we're doing with recreation.
Thanks, Amanda. So yeah, it feels like, and I'm sure for a lot of folks, those first 2 weeks were dedicated to, we were answering a lot of community questions with that help email and trying to connect with residents. We also had we were pulling sort of a lot of resources, websites, information from various geographic locations to get up onto our COVID page that had a specific recreation focus. But now that sort of, it feels like we're past that apex of people looking for that type of help. It's not to say it's gone away completely, but in recreation, we started to shift the focus. And it stemmed from asking the question, how much sort of resources can we throw onto a website before it becomes too much? And we know the research behind information overload. And if there was any example of that in these times, it would be now, in terms of the stress and anxiety of people looking on websites. And that's the consistent feedback we've had from not only residents, but other people across the country, especially my conversations with teachers and parents, is just the amount of information that's out there. And it can become overwhelming fairly quickly. So what we tried to do is transition a little bit into, let's focus on what we can do locally instead of sharing all of those resources that might come from wherever. And so we started to create a separate web page, banff.ca/active, where we could start filling that with tangible things that residents could turn to. And I think Tim touched on it perfectly in terms of, and we'll go through some of these examples, but I mean, there's numerous things that are coming from various parts of the world that have gained traction throughout this. But having that local connection, having someone lead a Zoom class that people in the community recognize is key. So maybe the next slide, Amanda, is we started developing adult programs. Granted, most of these are Zoom-based, but it's, you can see some of the things we did. Some success stories. I mean, the first yoga class we offered online had 20 people sign up. But a youth thing we tried a few days ago only had one youth sign up or join the Zoom. So it's a mixed bag of trial and error. It also depends on the community's capacity. We're sort of, right now, we're in a situation where we're asking people instructors leading these Zoom meetings or recreational opportunities to do it on a volunteer basis. Amanda's working on finding grants or funding so that we can continue to pay these instructors to do these courses. And then we're also inhibited by, what are these instructors challenged with at home in their personal lives, and what capacity do they have? So again, a lot of trial and error. I think at this point, we're throwing things against the wall and seeing what sticks. We're also mindful, though, of wanting to do things in a meaningful way. So still trying to focus on quality over quantity, and I'll maybe touch a little bit on that more later. I think we can go to children and youth. Again, coming back to, there's a ton of celebrities telling stories online. There's a ton of other people telling stories online. But we had, a lot of our youth and children know one of our community members. We call her Miss Erin. And so she did a series of 4 different stories. And again, that personal connection with the community of a recognizable face. Pete is another one of our recreational leaders. He has uploaded videos as well. He's doing 3 times a week a Zoom meeting with youth who want to join and talk about sports. The tough thing on all of this is we know the research on screen time. And so, obviously we're in an exceptional time. But we're asking ourselves, what's recreation's role throughout the next couple months in terms of trying to balance that screen time a little bit? So, we're still doing some programs through Zoom. We see benefit in that, but we're also at least trying to ask that question: how can we move away from screen time a little bit? I think Amanda's gonna play one of the videos from Pete just to give you a sense of how we're trying to connect with youth.
Yeah, and just one other thing to note there, in less than a week of our banff.ca/active page, we've had 4,000 views. And we've uploaded 5 videos so far, and we've already have over 4,000 views of those videos as well. So that's less than a week. They were uploaded last Friday. So here's a quick little snapshot of some of the stuff we're doing. Hopefully it works.
Maybe no sound.
Yeah, Amanda, we're not getting the audio, but if you want, you can share the link to the video in the chat if people want to check it out later.
Maybe Amanda's getting the sound, so I'll talk through it. I'm guessing no one else is getting the sound. This is Pete, one of our rec leaders. Again, he's just, this is to reach out to children and youth in the community. Further in the video, we have, obviously a link to the banff.ca/active, which then kind of leads into the lending program that we've done. So Amanda, I don't know if you can hear me, but I think we're going to skip to the next slide. So from that, I think Steve did the poll at the beginning. There's a few people, it looks like, who have tried to do sort of door-to-door delivery. We're trying this as well. We're starting small. We're offering some family fun kits that have different things in it for families. We've just developed a garden kit from one of our staff for families to grow inside. Sports equipment, so basketballs. We're going to offer skateboards soon, yoga equipment, board games. Again, we've started small, but knowing that this is going to last for however long, a couple months. We're going to continually add things every week that they can request. We've even had demand outside of Banff, so we're doing some of that support for Lake Louise as well. And we're trying to make that delivery as easy as possible. And I'll talk about this more, I think, in opportunities. But again, making this as easy as possible for the community so typically we would have them register through our registration system, which for us is booking, but decided to go the route of allowing people to call or just email to make it as easy as possible. I think the next slide, hopefully you're not bored yet in this presentation, but I think one of the things we know all the research in recreation behind unstructured time, the value of it, as well as boredom, and yet it feels like sometimes we have a hard time living that or promoting it. And so in this time where families are really struggling with how to be at home with one another, and again, we see it in everything you see on social media, whether it's lists of resources, lists of activities, and all of that, I think, is extremely helpful for families to a degree. I think we also, is there an opportunity for recreation to sort of remind people that it's okay for not only kids to be bored, but for adults to be bored as well. Again, the research shows the creativity that comes along with that. And anyways, there's links here in terms of that unstructured play and that boredom. But I think recreation has a role in reminding the community about the power of being bored in a time like this, and that we don't always have to have something for kids to do or something for ourselves to do. Challenges. Inconsistent messaging. Yeah, I think, it's been tough for us to, a couple of weeks ago, we were really promoting still going outside, and now it feels like it's getting tougher day in and day out. So I think ARPA shared the link to Outdoor Play Canada's statement around COVID and time outside. And so we're just trying to balance that sometimes inconsistent messaging of staying home versus going outdoors and how you maintain that physical distancing. And so I think that'll be a continuing sort of conversation with how to message that properly in the days ahead. Back to you, Amanda, I think.
Yeah, the only other thing I think, Colin, we were going to speak to there is just, we hear also a lot of people just saying, go outside to your backyard and play out there, or just play within your home. And, in Banff, we can really attest to, we have a lot of folks that live here that live in confined spaces and in shared accommodations with no green space, oddly enough, in their backyard. So, asking someone to stay home when they don't actually have any space to engage outside can be challenging. So we just need to be clear about the types of messaging we put out there, and we make sure we're cognizant of everyone else's socioeconomic status when we talk about those pieces. So from back to like the higher level piece of the challenges from the recreation, management through COVID, I would say, quite obviously, I think we're probably all experiencing this is, we had to completely switch gears, go to online virtual programming, try to think about how we manage screen time through all that. And this is a huge undertaking that requires a lot of resources. So, I have a reduced staffing team, but they're very passionate and dedicated and love their community. So they were keen to get going on all of it. But in turn, we're starting to see some employee burnout. So we've got a few people that are off today to extend that long weekend. Just to make sure that they're also taking care of themselves and their families. So, I think, as community leaders, we always try to put ourselves last and put the community first. And we need to make sure we're checking in with our staff and see how their mental health is doing and how they're moving along through all of these pieces as well. And then I think the other challenge for us is, you know, the rec centers are closed, we've closed all the facilities, and where does it end? You know, we want to make sure there's still some provision of spaces and places for people to get outside. We know there's a lot of benefits to nature for mental health. And so we're really appreciative of all the messaging ARPA's given, and we support all those directives as well. And just to speak back to the staffing levels, obviously budget cuts, you know, the first thing we heard was cut your equipment, cut your programming, supply budgets, because you're not going to operate for 3 months. And then we're going back and saying, actually, we are going to operate, but, you know, in addition to that, we're going to have no revenue coming in for programming, but please don't take that stuff away. We want to switch to delivery and move through that. So that's been challenging, but we're really trying to push the senior administration to leave those pieces out, because we think they're, in terms of emergency social services, it's a key piece for resident health and well-being. And then another challenge for us is measuring the success. So how do we measure success for these virtual programs or for these delivery programs, or you know, are these things we're doing actually connecting that list of resources? How many people are actually utilizing it? So we're having to develop new tools here on the fly to measure what does work and what does not work. Got a few more here and then we're done. The only other challenges I've just recently thought about is, you know, we're all switching to these online classes and programs. And there's this whole liability piece that's hanging out there. And I think we need to work with AUMA and some others on, if we're doing Zoom classes and programs, how do we get waivers signed, or how do we make sure people know that things can be being recorded, or how do we know that the space that they're going to be doing that activity is safe? So there's this whole other can of worms that we are essentially ignoring right now. But I think that the coming weeks we'll have to start addressing as to how we move through that. So opportunities, I think I spoke a lot to saying I think it's important that recreation collaborate and partner with FCSS and ESS teams to, because we play a pivotal role in resident health and well-being. And so I think we can work with them and partner with them and support where needed, whether it be food security. We're looking at actually operating the town's greenhouses this summer for our greenhouse society. So our staff will actually go in, do planting, do harvests until they're open, and deliver direct to residents. Just because our nonprofit is uncertain and feels a little uncomfortable. We have 3 greenhouses, 140 plots. That's a lot of food security in town. So we didn't want to lose that opportunity. So we're going to step in and support. Other opportunities, I think everyone should be aware that there's going to be a lot of funding coming. So make sure you're ready with what you want to deliver during this time, or what you will want as a part of your recovery program. You know, Joe mentioned changes to the Canada Jobs program with 100% subsidy for students. So where are some gaps you can fill? Is it maybe putting some staff in parks to make sure physical distancing is happening, or, you know, talking about free games and activities that can happen in open parks without touching each other, and maintaining physical distancing? What does that look like? So I think we all need to be creative. We just applied for a sandbox grant, which closes today. A small micro grant to support the programming we're already doing. And then we also have the foundations, and I think many foundations are coming out with community foundations with some response grant programs in the next couple of weeks. So my recommendation is talk to your funders. If there was funding that was supposed to be coming in that's now being held, if there's ways that you feel you can still do that work creatively, I say go back to them and tell them what you plan to do and see if you can access those funds now. So we are doing that ourselves with the Community Foundation in Banff. Other opportunities, I think there's going to be a lot of new program delivery models that we could utilize beyond COVID. So don't just think, you know, when this hits stop, you know, because it will be slow. There's things that we could carry on and maybe benefit from. And I think it's an opportunity and it's a challenge. I think when we get to the fall and winter this year, there's going to be a large appetite from community for programmed activities. So how do we make sure we're set up for success for that? With that reduced staff who are typically doing planning for fall and winter right now while doing COVID, it again comes back to this capacity piece. And then we also have concerns over, will we have qualified instructors? So how are people maintaining their certifications during this period of closure if they have no revenue coming in. So those contract instructors, we're looking at finding some grants for them to maybe maintain their ECEs online, so that when we hit start again in September, they're actually ready to deliver for us. And we're not in a position where they need to recertify and then we can get going again. So we're just thinking about that piece as a part of our recovery. And it's also something, most of those programs are available online that they can do in this time. And then the last piece, I think, is work with your infrastructure teams or your business development teams, because I think this is the year where if you had capital works in your rec center or on your sports field, this is the year we should really be pushing those folks and supporting those folks to have that work happen. If we know we're going to have shorter seasons, this might be the year where you want to encourage those capital work projects to happen, so we can reduce impacts in future years. So we're undertaking 10 capital projects. That's a couple $1 million worth of work this fall for our rec ground site. So we're upgrading all of our sports fields, installing a new dog park and those pieces, because we know that this is the year where we'll have the least impact on our user groups. We have a really short season for play outside in summer in Banff. So and a short construction season. So we're just cognizant of that and trying to take advantage of it. And then I'll just shoot it back to Colin for our question for the group. And I think this is probably the most important piece to us right now in week 4.
Yeah, I'm just cognizant of the time. So this is
Yes.
This is just the last slide, and then. But yeah, I think the question we're asking ourselves is: Are we making recreation as simple as possible in our community? I gave the example of the equipment lending and how, you know, typically in a normal program we would have someone absolutely go through booking, but in this pandemic we've allowed people to phone in or email. But I think we're asking ourselves the question, well, why are we just doing this in a pandemic? Is there opportunity to make it, to simplify recreation beyond this once we're out of it? Are there opportunities to look at our field as a whole, and try to find ways, you know, what are we doing effectively? What are our inefficiencies? I think lots of companies and organizations are looking at the way systems are structured and the processes that happen within those structures. Do we as a recreation field, not only in our own communities, but as sort of a collective field as a whole, are we able to look at our structures and processes and sort of reevaluate in the months to come? I think that's it. If there's any questions or comments, but I know that might be it for time. Thanks.
Yeah, I mean, thanks, Colin and Amanda. We are over time, but we still have 104 participants online, and there is a number of questions that people have put into the portal, which I think would be great to answer. So we are going to continue. If you have to leave, thanks for joining us. But a lot of these are specific. The first ones, well, I'll get rid of the first one quickly. Yes, the PowerPoint, we will share it, hopefully up by after the weekend, and the links will be in the PowerPoint, so that's not a problem. There's a few questions, Colin, and specifically to the lending program. So
Yeah,
yeah, so how do you ensure the loaned equipment is virus-free when it comes back and before it goes out to the next family?
Yeah, so what we've done is just decide that once the family has it, we're not getting it back for potentially several months, and we're okay with that. So they're just going to keep it until it's been it's at a point where they can sort of give it back.
Okay, perfect. Just maybe describe the overall process for the lending program from start to finish briefly, I guess. So.
Yeah, I mean, really everything is listed on that webpage that we've created, /active, and a family can look through that list. There's a link to our registration system so they can fill out that information and request what they want, or they can just look at that list online and they can send an email to our community services department, or they can still call community services and ask for whatever they want. If they want a family adventure kit and a yoga kit, we take that information, we get their address, their phone number, and then we do deliveries within 48 hours. Okay.
I'm assuming you kind of already answered this, but it's a free service. And how do you ensure that you're going to get it back in a complete kit? And it sounds like you probably don't care, but.
Yeah, that's pretty much it. We're willing to take that risk. I think benefit of the doubt that people have good intentions. So I'm sure we'll get some of that equipment back. I'm sure people have, there's other equipment lending programs in the community in general, and you always take a bit of a loss with equipment that gets sort of damaged or whatnot, but willing to take a little bit of a hit on that so that families still have something in their homes.
Perfect. I think one more related to it. In terms of delivery, are they picking up curbside? How are you dropping it off at homes in a safe distance way?
Yeah, I mean, staff are wearing gloves to deliver it and just putting it on either the front porch or curbside, calling them, saying it's on the curb for pickup. So we coordinate them, we say, hey, we're going to be there in 10 minutes, and then we'll call or sit in the car and make sure that they actually, get the equipment from curbside or their front porch before leaving.
Okay.
I think the only thing I would like to chime in with that is we were originally trying to utilize volunteers. We had a huge group of volunteers that wanted to support with delivery. But as a municipality, I would note that it's been a little difficult to work through the logistics and the liability of utilizing volunteers for that. So I would just caution folks to maybe speak with their health and safety team first if they're thinking about going ahead with this, and just be aware of the impacts that it might have to staff and allocation of resources, because it is a little difficult to work through that volunteer piece that we've experienced.
Yeah, thanks. An unrelated question to the lending program. It's for probably Amanda and Colin again. Have you explored offering classes where people can actually pay a registration fee at a reduced rate in order to raise a little bit of revenue to pay the contracted instructors?
So what we've done is we've actually allowed our fitness staff that typically provide classes for us. We're just sharing most of them have their own websites and their own businesses. So we're sharing their businesses if they will provide free access to those that can contact them and say that they can't afford it right now. So they all have through their website set up online programs for the most part. So we'll share those in these situations where they're also providing it for free for low-income families and individuals. And then the courses that we're running directly with instructors are all at no charge. Again, we were planning on offering free recreation this fall. So in terms of our council, the $3 revenue that you might get for that class right now versus the overall community benefit and health and well-being, I think we're just taking the approach of we want to take care of our people right now, and we're not worried about that $15 we might get in revenue.
Okay, thanks. So this one could be a general one too, but our marketing coordinator is pushing back on doing online programming videos because people can just access through Google those types of activities. You mentioned the local connection with staff doing the videos. Do you have any other feedback I could use to justify moving forward with this approach? I'll open the floor from that one.
Maybe Tim would be good to answer that one.
Sure, I can try. I think the justification is, again, the connection piece that we all sort of talked about, is that you don't know who the person is on YouTube, and they might be a celebrity and they might be a star, but there's no connection. And like you folks have been talking about, of trying to get your instructors back online and in a space where they can do it, I would say all the value is there, is that you already have the meaningful connection with people, and someone's YouTube video doesn't. So there is a lot of value, and my team has had this problem as well of saying like, well, this isn't really in line with our mission and our vision and our values, and at the same time it's like, we're in a crisis and everybody needs a little bit of support. And until we get our programming up and running the way we really like it, like this is a way to keep the connection, keep the line open. And we've had a ton of people reach out to us through Facebook Messenger, through Instagram messages of just saying, thank you for doing this, or how can I get support on X, Y, or Z? And then the flip side of it too is the marketing side of it, in terms of, this is completely crass, but revenue generation, it puts your brand out there, and it does.
Yeah, thanks, Tim.
I sound crass, but it's true.
Rob's asking, this is a great Red Deer question, because I've got it a lot this week, because Red Deer's IT department hates Zoom, so they won't let them use it because of the security issues. I mean, I'll let you guys answer it from a municipal perspective. We're using Zoom for our webinars. We don't really have a security issue with our webinars. I mean, we're not doing council meetings or anything with Zoom, our board meetings. we're just doing our webinar. So I mean, no, we don't really have any great security concerns over it. I think Zoom's actually patching stuff up as they go along each week. There seems to be new patches, but any thoughts from a municipal perspective using Zoom?
I can say from the town of Banff, we were experiencing the same pushback from IT, and they were trying to find a package that would be the most secure. And our ESS team just pushed back and said, listen, the most important thing we need to do is be able to reach our vulnerable populations. This is the best and easiest platform for those people with limited computer skills. It's easy to access on a phone. Lots of our residents don't have computers or desktops. And so we really push back on the value of this app over others because of ease. And we needed to pick something that was being used the most as well, so we can have it be simplified for those vulnerable population groups. And I agree exactly with what Steve's saying. Zoom's coming out with more and more each week in terms of security. You know, you start that class, that instructor can then close the door to that class once they've checked everyone in and made sure they're the right people. There's the waiting room features. There's so many features available through Zoom to not allow the Zoom bombing to happen. So I think, you know, we just need to be mindful about how we move forward and be aware of the functionality that Zoom has to offer.
Perfect. Thanks, Amanda. I think the next one here is just more of a comment about Colin's comment about looking at our overall processes and how we operate in terms of would make a great ARPA conference session. So Colin, maybe submit that. We have our call for presentations open right now. Everybody on the phone, if you have good ideas too, please submit. It's going to be open until April 17th. You can access that off our website under the conference tab. Right now, I mean, just as an update, we're kind of still hoping for a physical conference, but we're able to adjust as need be if it's a hybrid event or a virtual event. So we will still have a conference event in the fall regardless. So Amanda and Colin, what is your resources for finding funding? I'm assuming they're just the question is, where do you seek funding from?
Again, I think it's the advantage of us of sitting within community services. So working with our community development office and just, you know, they're in tune with so many grant programs that are coming through the door. But again, I think it's the foundations right now. I think the Calgary Foundation, our local foundation, I think there's going to be a good amount of funding coming out through those folks. I think, yeah, my answer would be utilize the resources you always have and connect with those past funders. Let them know the struggles you're having. I'm sure they all have money in their banks right now because they haven't released any funds yet this year. So let them know and build that connection now before they go out to say, because I guarantee you they're all going to be saying, what are you doing in response to COVID? Or they're thinking they're going to hold the funds until COVID's done. So you need to convince them what you're doing now is valuable and that you should be accessing those funds now. So you need to reach out with your past funders, I think.
Tim, anything to
add? I would echo the same point. We've just been having more conversations with funders than ever. And I think a lot of people have actually been quite appreciative of how quickly we've managed to switch gears to still fill a gap for people and they see the value of it. So they've been pretty willing to support, like Jumpstart is one of our largest funders, and the folks there have just been incredible at saying, keep doing what you're doing, we got your back, and being open and transparent about it, I think is the best message from Amanda there too, is just having a good conversation and explaining the need is higher than ever and we can fill the need.
From an ARPA perspective, you'll see a letter we're going to share next week we sent to our minister, and there's some national advocacy going on just in terms of supporting the role recreation can play in recovery from a municipal and a NGO perspective. So we'll share that next week. The last one here from Rob's, I think partly comment, partly question, but just in the concerns of the Alberta economy and the high level of job losses we're going to see, I think COVID and non-COVID with the oil and gas, and you guys mentioned it, there's probably going to be a big uptake on programming in the fall that might not be a reality early on. So I think that's some conversations we'll have on future webinars. As an aside, in my volunteer life, I'm on the Kids Sport Edmonton board, and you know, our programming is parked right now because we fund sport programs, but we're really concerned that in the fall that there's going to be a high need for low cost, no cost recreation. So I think I heard from Banff, I think I heard right that you guys are going to open up, or we're already planning on opening up free recreation. Was that for all, or was it for youth?
All.
Okay, wow. So I mean, I think that that's a good thing that municipalities need to have conversations about. I know that there's an immense cost with that, but I'm a big proponent of access and recreation for all. Programs like Tim's Free Footie are going to be, I think, even more important in the near future, or medium term future as well, in terms of supporting sport programming, other programming that's low, no cost. So that would be my only comment there. All right, well, we are now at 20 after, so we did go overtime. We still have 80 people roughly on, so thank you for sticking around. I want to thank Tim, Colin, and Amanda. Give them a hand, a virtual hand, yay. So thank you for your presentations and stuff today. We will have this recording sharing. If people want to share their resources with me, I'll add them to this page as well, along with the presentations and links to Free Footie. But yeah, thank you, and have a good Easter long weekend, and hopefully you get some good family time in. So